Hello, Dog Nation. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation. It's almost like a Nicolas Cage type thing there for a moment. Good to have you with us. DawgNation Daily, daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Harris Cherokee Casino Resort. Mike Griffith on the way. A little bit of a late start today, and I apologize for that. We'd actually been doing better about being on time. That's on me today, though. But nonetheless, good show for you. Really interesting stuff from Georgia players yesterday. Nakobe Dean, Kendall Milton, Warren Ericson, all speaking to reporters. We'll give you a little taste of some of what they had to say. It's all kind of a part of an ongoing G-Day preview that we have going on here. Just getting ready for Saturday. A lot of fun. Can't wait for it. Really excited about the show. So let's settle in, talk some Georgia football. Glad to have you with us. DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Harris Cherokee Casino Resort, begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Harris Cherokee Resort. Find us online at Caesars.com/Harris-Cherokee.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
Well, let me just say at the top of the show, I feel great today. I didn't say this yesterday because I'm a trained professional and you don't really care, but I was going to the doctor yesterday afternoon, something I don't do too much, hopefully. I'm healthy and safe. I don't have to go to the doctor too much, but a yearly physical yesterday. Had to fast, so I had no breakfast, no coffee. The whole thing was just kind of a disaster. I had some black coffee, but no cream and sugar the way that I kind of want it to be. So today I am fully fueled and ready to go and really excited about the show. And really the thing that I'm really excited about as we head towards G-Day is what the Georgia offense is going to look like. Not because I think that G-Day is some incredible snapshot of what the season's going to be like, but it's just as close as we get, right? I mean, it's at least a little bit of a glimpse about what has gone on during Georgia practice, and it's just kind of fun and entertaining, and most people kind of take it that way. And, there's obviously, I think, legitimate hope that the Georgia offense is the best that it's been in the Kirby Smart era on the field in 2021. And you'd like to see a little bit of a display of that from what you see on Saturday for G-Day. With that in mind, a couple Georgia players had a chance to speak to reporters yesterday, and some of what they said I thought was really interesting. First of all, I think that Warren Ericson's a really good spokesman for Georgia. I don't know, what the future holds for the Georgia offensive line. I have said before that I think that Ericson's probably a slight favorite to be your starter there at center over someone like Senator Von Braun. I think Von Braun is eventually going to be hard to keep off the field somewhere just because I think he's that good of a prospect. But for now, it seems like Ericson may have the inside track on being that center, and Ericson kind of presents himself as a center, right? He's, kind of got that leadership vibe, the way that Georgia centers of the past have kind of had. Maybe Ericson cut from a slightly different cloth than some of those guys, but nonetheless, it's kind of a leadership position. You're kind of a spokesman for the team as that center, and Ericson kind of comes across that way. And one of the questions that Ericson was asked of, hey, you're working with this offense, you're potentially, kind of at the center of the offense, literally and figuratively as the center for this team potentially. What do you see from this? Obviously, Kirby Smart, we made a big deal about this going back to, was it Monday's show, about, hey, we want to be a vertical passing attack. Those explosive plays that fans say they want, we want to be able to provide those here this season. That's something that Kirby Smart has said. And so with that in mind, what is the recipe for how you get there? Well, Georgia offensive lineman Warren Ericson weighed in on that yesterday. I think this is pretty interesting. Take a listen to this.
What I've seen so far is I've seen just a group just progressing every single day, just getting better and better and better and better. That's what spring's all about, really. Like you said, we want to be explosive in the passing game. We want to be explosive in the run game. So I think just intertwining those things two together and trying to be the best offense that we possibly can in those two aspects. So, yeah, I mean, I think that if we can, get those two things and get them rolling and just keep progressing every single day, we should be pretty good to roll.
I think it's really interesting, and obviously we hope that, version of Georgia, good to roll, as Warren Ericson says there. Hopefully we see some version of that on display on Saturday for G-Day. But I think it's really interesting, in my role as, host of DawgNation Daily, presented by Harris Cherokee Casino Resort, I get a chance to talk to a lot of Georgia fans. And it's always interesting to me the issues in which you can kind of, I don't want to say drive a wedge, because honestly it's not that serious of a topic, but where there's a dividing line amongst fans. And there is definitely a faction of kind of like old school Georgia fans on one side and new school Georgia fans on the other. that on certain issues you kind of hear a little bit of difference of opinion. You know, when someone like me hears Kirby Smart say, hey, we want to be a vertical passing attack, and I come on the show and celebrate that as a good thing, there are some Georgia fans who are going to say back in response to that, well, come on, BA, I don't want this to start looking like one of those, Big 12 type teams, or for those of us who grew up in the 80s back when the WAC was a thing, you had these, these high-scoring games back then with no defense. That's not what I want Georgia to look like. They don't want Georgia to look like Oklahoma, a team that scores plenty of points, but defensively in the games that matter most can't seem to come up with stops when they really need to. And I totally understand all of that. I think that's why what Warren Ericson says there is so important to hear. That when we say, those of us who want this for Georgia, and when Georgia itself says this, Ericson speaking on behalf of the team right there, when the statement is made, we want to be a vertical passing team, it's important to note that what Warren Erickson's saying there, and what Kirby Smart said when he first said this, last Saturday, is it's not that we want to take something off of the table so that there's more passing plays to go around. It's that we want to add this into the mix of what Georgia's already been trying to do. This is an additive issue, not so much a replacement issue. We're not replacing, or if Georgia was saying itself, it would say it this way, we're not replacing what we have done. We're trying to add to what we've done in the past. And Warren Erickson says right there, the explosive passing plays plus the dominant running game. And you don't have to look very far to see evidence of that. Alabama a year ago. Obviously, Mac Jones, Devontae Smith were setting records. It's probably the most explosive passing offense I've ever seen, certainly in the SEC. But Najee Harris still had a huge season. I've said this before. LSU in 2019. If Alabama wasn't the best passing attack I've ever seen in the SEC, then LSU the previous year probably was. But Clyde Edwards-Helaire still had 1,400 yards rushing. They didn't give up the running game to be better at the pass. They added a big-time passing attack to what was already kind of a championship-level running game, and that's exactly what Georgia's trying to do as well. In fact, if you don't believe me on this, you don't take my word on this, take the word of Kendall Milton, who, by the way, is just a smooth guy. I kind of became very interested in Kendall back when he was like a junior in high school because some of the interviews that he gave, including to our Jeff Sintel, he was just, very, very clear in his manner of speaking and just a really good spokesman for Georgia. Kind of interesting that yesterday was the first time we've had a chance to speak and hear from him since he's been on this Georgia roster, because he really speaks well on behalf of UGA. And for Georgia fans who kind of wonder, well, if Georgia is becoming more of a vertical passing team, what does that mean for the running game? Milton did not mince words with his opinion on that. This is Kendall.
This is Georgia's RVU, so I feel like the run game is always going to play a part in the offense, but we're an offense that has a lot of weapons all over the field, and with all those weapons, everybody wants to get the ball, so you got to make the scheme to where it fits everybody, it basically benefits everybody. So, I expect we're going to run the ball, but I also expect we're going to pass the ball because of our weapons and everything we have on the team.
Yeah, I think that Kendall's exactly right about that. Going to look to get big plays through the run and through the pass. And to me, the issue of, well, how much does Georgia throw it compared to how much Georgia runs it, both on G-Day on Saturday and the upcoming season, I actually think that's the wrong way to look at it. You're not going to measure Georgia's success as a passing team or a running team on the basis of how many times they do it. To me, it's more of an issue of when they do it. For Kirby Smart to say, we want to be a vertical passing team. Now, I can't presume to know exactly what he means by that, but here's, as a fan and someone who watches college football closely, here's what I hope that Kirby Smart means on that. I hope he means that Georgia's going to look to throw the ball early in the game and on early downs. That's what vertical passing teams do. They throw early in a game to establish a lead. They throw on early downs as a way of staying ahead of the chains. That's what teams who want to be vertical passing, that's what teams who want to be explosive in the passing game, that's the way that you do that. And then once you have the lead in the fourth quarter, go back and look at Alabama a year ago, pounding teams with the run for almost the entirety of the fourth quarter, because at that point in time they're sitting on a lead and they're just kind of coasting to victory, and they did that so much a year ago. It's not about the total number of passing plays compared to the total number of running plays. It's about when those passing plays are called. Are you calling them early in the game? Are you calling them on early downs, first and second down? As David Pollack said in our show a few weeks ago, 2nd 7 for Georgia needs to be a passing down if you truly want to be a vertical passing attack, and that's one of the ways in which you're going to measure that. And we'll get a chance to see some of that with G-Day there on Saturday. Because let me kind of bring all this to kind of, I guess, ahead, with this conversation. I think there's sort of a misunderstanding related to some of this with the Georgia offense. I think that some people would say, well, Georgia's been really good with its rushing attack. Now it needs to be good with its passing attack there as well. But the honest truth is that the passing attack for Georgia has been deficient enough, or certainly most of 2019, part of 2020. It's been deficient enough that the rushing attack for Georgia has actually suffered because of that. Let me show you this on the screen here for a moment. ESPN recently put out their top 20, their preseason FPI for the upcoming season. Now, we'll mock this in great detail later on in the show, but the thing that matters right now is, usual suspects up at the top. Alabama at 1, Oklahoma at 2, not a huge surprise there. Clemson at 3, Ohio State even in the top 5, not a huge surprise. Georgia, a little lower than some fans might like. Georgia comes in at 7th on this list. That's the preseason FPI analytics-based stuff for ESPN for the upcoming season. Here's the thing you got to understand. Is that, these analytics numbers, and like I said, you can mock, and we'll get into more detail about some of the silliness that's in this top 10 on the show before we're done today, but when it comes to Georgia projected far lower than many of the other teams, including the team that'll play week 1 in Clemson, what the ESPN folks kind of have to go to on that is, and that's good enough on that, what the ESPN folks all they have to go on something like that is what they've seen from Georgia over the course of the last couple of years on the field. We all know the Georgia passing attack hasn't been what it's supposed to be. But look what's happened to the Georgia running game in the last couple of years there as well. After leading the SEC in rushing yards in 2017, 2018, Georgia's just been 5th in the SEC in rushing yards the last 2 years in 2019 and 2020. As I said before, when you don't have that threat of the vertical passing attack, when you're not able to confidently throw the ball early in the game, when you're not able to confidently throw the ball on early downs, teams start creeping up towards the line of scrimmage, and they start taking your running game there away as well. So when Warren Ericson says, we want to be able to do both, we want to throw the ball and run the ball. When Kendall Milton says, we want to be able to do both, we want to throw the ball and run the ball. It's almost like in 2021, you have to be able to do both, otherwise you can't really do either. So that's the situation that faces Georgia as it moves through the upcoming season, not choosing between, do we want to be a running team, do we want to be a passing team, but establishing the necessary pass game to make the run game even possible. That's the recipe for a championship potentially for Georgia on the field here in the fall of 2021, and hopefully we'll get a chance to see a glimpse of that on G-Day coming up this Saturday. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by our friends at Harris Cherokee Casino Resort. Hello to you, and thanks for being with us, no matter how you get to us today, live on video, 10 a.m., Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, Radio Noon on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, and as a podcast, all the podcast platforms, Apple, Google, Spotify. We post the show at the world-famous DawgNation.com. Many of you listen right there through SoundCloud. Just a big thanks to you for all the ways in which you make this show possible. By the way, I think we have an inside track on a new technological venture that we're going to be going on in the days ahead, so I'll be telling you about that coming up here pretty soon there as well. So a lot of fun stuff happening here around DawgNation. Listen, it's our great sponsors who make all of this so possible, including my friends at Harris Cherokee Casino Resort. Let me tell you something. It's been warm the last couple of days here in the Atlanta area where I live. It gets me thinking about pool weather, and it also gets me thinking about travels, weekend getaways, things like that. I love short drives from Atlanta because it's just more time to spend doing the fun things you want to do. That's what Harris Cherokee Casino Resort provides for you. The Book now open, sports gaming there in the mountains, western North Carolina, luxurious spa, world-class shopping, gourmet dining, incredible entertainment options, socially distanced gaming floor for the folks who enjoy doing that kind of thing and who doesn't. Let's face it, it's all great stuff at Harris Cherokee Casino Resort, and a great chance for you to get away right now and go enjoy that. Sports gaming, everything else. Website to go to find out more information. It's Caesars.com/Harris-Cherokee. That's Caesars.com/Harris-Cherokee. That'll get you in touch. Find out about all the big things happening this spring, heading towards the summer at the beautiful properties of Harris Cherokee Casino Resort or Harris Cherokee Valley River. Check them out today. All right, it's Mike Griffith here coming up in just a moment. We'll do more of a G-Day preview with Mike. I'll ask Mike the same question I think I've asked every guest this week, and I guess I'll probably do this. We'll make this kind of a clean sweep throughout the rest of the week. Who are you looking forward to seeing on G-Day? What do you want to see? What are you curious about? We'll kind of start the conversation with Mike on that and just sort of see where it goes after that. Before that, though, let's go around the doghouse here for a moment. And I do want to kind of just take a moment to pause a little bit more on some of the stuff that Kendall Milton had to say yesterday. I think that Milton's just kind of as I said before, he's a smooth-talking guy, thoughtful, introspective, and really an exciting player on this Georgia roster. There's so many young guys who are, looking for a bigger opportunity this upcoming season. One of the things that makes G-Day interesting on Saturday, it's one of the things that makes the upcoming season, I think, really fun there as well. And there's no doubt that Kendall's a huge fan favorite on this team. A lot of fans looking to see more of him. Milton himself, I'm sure, would like to provide more on the field there this upcoming year. But if you think that Kendall is somehow, impatient about all of this, or maybe bitter might be a word that you could use for the fact that, as it seems right now, there are a couple of upperclassmen still ahead of him on this Georgia depth chart, with Zamir White and James Cook making the decision to come back. Boy, you don't get any of that from Kendall Milton, really putting a team-first attitude on display when he spoke to reporters yesterday about what his first season was like at Georgia. Maybe not playing as much as someone of his recruiting caliber would have maybe thought he'd be playing during a freshman season. Great stuff from Kendall Milton. Take a listen to this.
Last year, going through the season, it was actually great for me. I was able to learn a lot from James Cook and Zamir White, just sitting back and just being a soak, just absorbing every day, just learning new things, learning, because going from high school to the SEC, that's a very big jump. So just sitting back, learning ways to be successful in my game on the field, that was a huge blessing for me as a freshman.
Let me be overly simplistic for a moment, but I think that in this particular case, there's, certainly some wisdom in this simplicity. To be a great college football team, you have to have depth. We would all agree with that. But the next thing to understand, though, is to have depth, you also have to have players who are willing to buy into a team concept. If you're only satisfied with being the man at whatever position we're talking about, then you're not going to ever be able to contribute to depth, because there's always going to be someone rivaling you to be viewed as the man, taking touches, snaps, whatever, how you want to measure, your contribution to the team. There's always going to be someone who's taking some of that from you if you're on a deep roster that strives towards being great. So when Kendall Milton right there says, hey, this is the SEC, big step up from high school football, I had a lot to learn from guys like Zamir White and James Cook. That's the kind of statement that Georgia fans ought to celebrate. It's the kind of thing that Georgia fans ought to take a page from Milton, because there's all this impatience that creeps in from time to time with fans of, why isn't so-and-so playing more, and, what's going on here, and what's happening there, and it kind of becomes this, kind of wished, imagined into existence controversy from time to time. But Kendall Milton right there says exactly what you want someone to say, a player who says, listen, I'm a part of a deep stable of running backs. As Milton said a little earlier, RBU, that's what Georgia's known to be. You can't be RBU if you don't have a whole bunch of running backs at any given time in a place like Georgia. Georgia has a lot of that right now. So, listen, fans can be free to kind of cheer for what they want and do what they want. But if you really want to kind of put your energy as a fan and what you root for towards something that I believe really helps this team, celebrate the guys like that who say, listen, I'm more than happy to be patient. And there was another moment in the press conference from Milton yesterday. We said, it's all on God's time. It's all on God's plan in terms of when it happens for me. And I'm just ready to let that kind of play out on the timeline that, powers larger than me have kind of put together here. I think it's great stuff from Kendall. And by the way, you should go to the DawgNation YouTube page. You should watch the entire thing for yourself. It was all really, really good. Before I bring on Mike Griffith, let me also remind you of this, as we wrap up around the doghouse here today, that in many ways, G-Day is the end of something, the end of spring practice for Georgia, but it is also the start of something really important there as well. It's the Georgia Giving Week from the UGA Alumni Association actually kicks off with G-Day on Saturday, here on Saturday, April the 17th. You've heard Kirby Smart saying this on social media, really challenging all dogs to get involved. Big time participation from those who are, graduates of the University of Georgia, folks who care about the impact that UGA is making in the world around us. Beginning April 17th through April 23rd, it's the Week of Giving to really help fund the next great generation of UGA, students that go through the program, but also the work that Georgia's doing around the world. Your chance to kind of get involved on all that. So many of the folks who listen to us right now, consider themselves stakeholders in the University of Georgia, who care about what's happening there, in the shadow of the arch there in Athens. So this is your chance to get involved from April 17th to the 23rd for the Week of Giving here. There's also some great incentives to do this there as well. All alumni who donate during the Week of Giving are going to get a 20% discount from the UGA bookstore, and that's a really cool thing given all the great stuff at the UGA bookstore. And of course, we're looking forward to being there on Saturday. That's a coupon that's valid from April 15th through the 30th. And every donor that gets involved here for the Week of Giving gets an exclusive set of vintage UGA embroidered patches. And doesn't that sound like a lot lot of fun there as well. So here's the website to go to. You see it on your screen. Calling All Dogs, that's DAWGS, callingalldogs.uga.edu. One more time, callingalldogs.uga.edu. The Week of Giving for the UGA Alumni Association begins Saturday. It goes for the next week after that through April 23rd. Get involved right now. Make your plans to get involved here today. All right, good to have you with us here today. DawgNation Daily, presented by Harris Cherokee Casino Resort. I thought that Nakobe Dean said something interesting yesterday in terms of kind of what he's looking for from G-Day on Saturday, and we'll touch on that before we're done with the program here today. But for now, look back on everything that's happened thus far this spring. Look ahead to what we might be able to see on Saturday. A guy who's had his finger on the pulse of all of it, Mike Griffith, here as a part of DawgNation Daily, presented by Harris Cherokee Casino Resort. Great to have all of you with us as well.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
And as we say hello to Mike Griffith here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Harris Cherokee Casino Resort. Mike, I want to start with you, kind of where I've kind of gone with our previous guests already this week, just kind of open-ended. We'll kind of work from there. It's G-Day on Saturday. There's been a lot of buzz about this and that and everything that's going on. And I'm kind of curious as to what you're curious about in terms of what you want to see, what you expect to see, what you're interested in seeing. You know, whether it's a couple of names or a couple of issues. What matters to you on Saturday for G-Day?
I guess I want to see Carson back and Brock Vandegrift. I want to see those guys throw the ball. Carson's had a year in the offense, and I heard so much about him this spring. Everyone's basically said how fluid he is and how good he looks back there, and people have told me great things about Brock. Brock's brand new to this, so that's impressive that Brock has looked good already. But big, strong arm. I guess his athleticism has translated. That's a question I asked. Was, how does a 1A private guy translate to the collegiate level? And everything I'm hearing is that Brock looks really good. Like he fits the part. He doesn't look out of place. Every bit the 5-star he was rated to be, and I've heard his arm strength's amazing. So I'm eager to see that. Obviously, I want to see more running backs. I want to see more Dejon Edwards. I'm curious to see how Dejon's doing. Don't know how much we're going to see of Milton. Milton's had 2 really, really strong scrimmages. I just don't know how much I don't think you want to risk a guy like that. Same thing. Zamir's been around long enough. You know what he can do. Same with James Cook. I wonder who's going to carry the ball. Right? Because this isn't really, Kirby's seen what he's needed to see, and this is an exhibition, so I think we'll see a lot of throwing from the backup quarterback, some of the young receivers, right? Justin Robinson, we'll see what kind of shape he's in. I know he's been a little dinged up lately. Demetrius Robertson has had a great spring from all accounts. I think D-Rob will probably be on display. Guys like that. Brock Bowers, a guy we've heard just a lot about from everybody. Kirby talks a lot about him, too. I'm kind of eager to see this young George Kittle clone as he's being compared. And then defensively, you look at some of the younger defensive backs like Keely Ringo, who we know is still playing himself into shape. Jalen Kimber, who by most accounts is, CB1 as of now. Obviously, there's a long offseason ahead. Amir Speed, a guy that's been around waiting for his opportunity. How's Amir going to look? And Channing Tindall and Quay Walker, some of those young linebackers. Ryan Trouble Davis, right? That's a guy that Kirby's called out recently. So a lot of names. Christopher Smith, the guy that took the Charles Atlas bodybuilding program this offseason, coming back to beat up the bullies on the beach. I want to see it for myself. I'm excited about that. I think Christopher Smith has a chance to be a breakout player.
So I want to obviously get into a lot of what you just said there. Let me do quarterbacks here first. Let me talk about Carson Beck for a moment, because this is what I said to Connor yesterday. For whatever reason, and I try to keep my ear to the ground as much as I can, it just seems like it was really quiet about Carson for most of last year. Maybe you were hearing things, but I wasn't really hearing much of anything at all. And that's not to say it was a bad thing or a good thing or anything like that. I just didn't really know where things stood with Carson Beck during his first year on campus. I just wasn't hearing very much. And it is kind of interesting. I know you wrote about him the other day, and there's been some other online chatter kind of related to this. It seems like for all, intents and purposes, Beck's had a pretty good spring, so I've kind of joined in what you've said here before, that right now Carson's one of the players I'm sort of most interested in on Saturday, just because I'm curious to see if what I'm able to see with my own eyes does kind of back up with what some other people have said. It's just amazing how the chatter around Beck, to my mind, in my ears, has seemingly increased compared to where it was for a lot of his first year on campus.
Well, I think, at this time last year, we were talking about Jamie Newman and Dwan Mathis. And,
Yeah.
They kind of look like 1A and 1B at this stage. I mean, those guys both big, strong-armed guys. And Dwan had a great offseason. It didn't show up in the game. But, just talking to people inside the huddle, hey, Dwan Mathis won that starting job last year. It wasn't given to him. Things obviously went awry against Arkansas. Instead came in and calmed everything down and was able to manage the offense pretty well for a few games there. And I don't count Stetson Bennett out. And this is a guy that the head coach has a lot of trust in. And, it's a guy that came from behind at halftime to beat Tennessee, came from behind at halftime to beat Arkansas, beat Auburn handily. So, Stetson's a guy that's accomplished. Not like he's just going to go away, I don't think. I think the reason maybe we're intrigued with Carson and maybe, Brock as well, certainly we all keep up with Centel's reporting on Gunnar Stockton at this stage, is, there was just so much of this Kirby's got to win now or never kind of talk because, JT will probably go pro after this year if he has a big year. And these guys represent the future, right? I mean, this is next man up, whether it's Carson or Brock. I mean, you got to think one of those guys is probably in line to be the guy in 2022. And so I think that's why we're intrigued because, you want to know that security that, I think everybody's all in on this year, and I think everybody recognizes it's a big opportunity to win a championship this year. But 2022, the way Kirby's recruited, the youth on the offensive line, the fact that Kendall Milton will be back for probably what will amount to a Heisman run in 2022, defense, a lot of talent there, a lot of young talent being recruited. Rebuilt secondary will be in year 2, or reloaded, I should say. So I think maybe we're intrigued, BA, because, we know they're going to contend for a championship this year, but we're probably all kind of looking ahead a little bit saying, could this guy be a championship quarterback too?
Well, I said this yesterday. Mike, this is Kirby's 6th year, but it's probably the first time that he's had what I think you and I would probably describe as a traditional quarterback situation where you have veteran starter with young guy waiting in the wings who could be next year's starter. In 2016, Eason emerged as the starter. The backup would have been an older guy who was on his way out of the program. In 2017, Eason Fromm, that wasn't a super traditional situation because both those guys were pretty young. 2018, we've obviously been down that road a million times. That's not necessarily a traditional situation either. 2019, I think Stetson Bennett has turned out to be better than maybe Georgia thought he was in 2019, but they weren't really treating that the way that we kind of typically see this stuff treated. And then obviously 2020 was a little bit of a crapshoot all the way around. This is kind of the first time that Kirby Smart has a chance to sort of establish what looks to be like a clear plan of succession is the word I'm looking for. With veteran JT Daniels, with you want to select Vandegrift, you want to select Beck. I'm like you. I think that Bennett, because he started before, has great value to Georgia. But in terms of a 2022 projection, one of those guys who emerges in a competition like that, kind of puts himself in a position that a lot of Georgia quarterbacks have not had. Young guy with talent, waiting in the wings, learning, and then potentially a little bit of a passing of the baton, maybe for the next season, with apologies to Gunnar Stockton, who's going to come in here and compete too. This just has a chance to be a little bit different than Kirby Smart's quarterback situation has looked since he got here in 2016.
It all sounds too perfect. So BA, that somebody's going to take a wrecking ball to this. Somebody's going to want to transfer out and start right away. I mean, this is just, I'll tell you, the transfer rules have just changed it where we really can't get comfortable with the notion. As much as we'd like to think what a wonderful succession of quarterback there's going to be, you and I both know how this thing works, right? And, Ohio State felt pretty good about Joe Burrow taking over for Dwayne Haskins. Georgia felt good about, Justin Fields coming in behind Jake Fromm at some point, right? And, it just, things change, right?
Yeah.
When you had a run, it's just remarkable to think about this. There were 3 straight Heisman Trophy winners that were transfer quarterbacks. It's not like this is a fluke or unique. I mean, it works, right? So, yes, the competition is great, and the depth is great. And I think with Gunnar Stockton kind of in the fold, maybe the unspoken word that maybe we're not supposed to speak, but let's go ahead and say it. Is there a competition between Carson Beck and Brock Vandegrift to be next man up? Is that what we're going to see at G-Day? It's great to think that they could both stick around, but is that realistic? I don't know. I know that they're both great quarterbacks. I know Georgia's a great place to be. I think right now you could make the argument that as we look at different draft projections and questions, that maybe there's a value to playing a quarterback in an offense where you're asked to read the entire field instead of half the field, where questions are being begged. So as Kirby said, somebody, I forget who it was, asked him the question about quarterback management, and he kind of chuckled and said, well, I know they like coming here. So all these people that want to be critical of Kirby Smart, i.e. people that he beats every year, right, or Alabama, who's trailed at halftime of all 3 games he's played them, they want to take their pot shots, but at the end of the day, look who's in Georgia's quarterback room, and look who's at other places. So Georgia's doing a lot right. Georgia fans should feel confident in their head coach, certainly in their offensive coordinator. And I think the future is really bright.
So let me just say this. I don't want to talk about quarterbacks the whole time, but I do want to say one thing about Brock Vandagriff, because I think it's really hard when you first step on campus to be really good right away. You're just absorbing so much, including just what campus life is kind of like at Georgia. But I do think because of the skill set that Vandagriff possesses, that as he gets comfortable, at a certain point, whether it's a month from now or 6 months from now, whenever else, there's going to be this exponential growth, I would believe, in him, just because at a certain point the skill set will be matched by the comfort in what Todd Monken kind of wants him to do. Now, will we see that on Saturday? Maybe it's a little too soon from that. Maybe I'll be pleasantly surprised. But here's all I want to really see from Brock on Saturday. I just want to see that ball zip, right? I want to see that big throw. The ball just looks different leaving the hand of a guy like Vandagriff. And that's just kind of one of those things you just kind of want to see. Is that as the kids like to say, just see him spin it. For now, that's all I really need to see. And then as he gets more comfortable and things along those lines, you get a chance to see more from him after that, maybe.
And I think you'll see that. I don't think there's any question. I think Brock will show you that arm. I think you'll see the mobility. I think you'll see the athleticism. And again, another great thing about that room is, it's a really good room, right? There's nobody fighting and biting in the back to try to get this or that. I mean, there's a real camaraderie there. And I think a lot of credit goes to JT Daniels for that. And this is why. Even though you could decry or question, JT didn't start till the last 4 games, maybe he should have started. The good news is that while JT was biding his time, while JT was doing those voluntary reps on the scout team, he was being a good teammate. He was supporting Stetson Bennett. He wasn't making any noise. He wasn't acting like, spoiled on the sideline. We've seen quarterbacks do that when they don't play. They pout. They separate themselves from the team. No, JT was being a leader before he was a leader. And because of the way he conducted himself before he was named the starter, I think that that's really benefited the quarterback room and the health of it. I think it makes it easy for Stetson Bennett now to continue, which Stetson was always a great teammate. That's one thing that he's universally known as, is a great young man and a great teammate. But it makes it easier now for Stet to be there for JT, or for Carson to be there for JT, because JT set an example because he was the backup. I mean, think about that. Here's a guy that was the National Player of the Year as a freshman, according to Max Preps. He was the National Player of the Year as a sophomore, according to Max Preps. He was the Gatorade National Player of the Year as a junior over Trevor Lawrence and over Justin Fields as a junior in high school, beat Trevor in the U.S. Army All-American game. Why didn't we hear about it? Because he was committed to USC and recruiting his regional. And then goes to USC in what should have been his senior year of high school. And he comes to Georgia, and he's a scout team guy with a knee that's recovering, and he humbly goes and plays on the scout team. And just quietly goes down there and cheers for his teammates during the game. I mean, this guy almost seems too good to be true in many respects. I'm not saying he's perfect. He did throw 2 interceptions last year. But, the leadership that he's shown, I think, really leads to the leash that Kirby Smart's given him. B, I think you were the first one to point out, hey, look at this. Kirby Smart's naming this guy starter? That doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Well, I guess it does if you show maturity and show great leadership. And I think that's what's happening. And I think that resonates throughout the quarterback room. And so I think that's part of the reason why. And I give Todd Monken credit, too. He's got these guys engaged. And JT said in a recent interview, as much as he knew or thought he knew, this is a scholarly kid, that Monken's helped him see the game in a whole different way. And that's why he's here instead of anywhere else. He could have gone anywhere out of Southern Cal. He came here because of Monken and his offense and Kirby Smart and his championship vision.
want to talk to you about a couple more things related to this Saturday for G-Day, Mike, coming up. Let me remind people real quick, though, Pella Window and Door of Georgia can help equip your house with energy-efficient windows and doors. I love telling their story because for homeowners, there are a couple things that really matter. How good your home feels on the inside, keeping the AC inside this time of year, not letting it creep out, plus how good your home looks on the outside. All of that really matters, and Pella Window and Door of Georgia can help do all that for you. Of course, nationally known company, that means unparalleled resources, locally, family-owned branch right here in Georgia, which means incomparable service. That's what Pella has. Also great savings as well. Currently 10% off your entire project or 0% APR for 24 months. Easy to get in touch with. If you're watching a video as you see on your screen, call them 678-638-1496. That's 678-638-1496. Or PellaofGA.com/DawgNation is the website. Once again, PellaofGA.com/DawgNation. So, Mike, we had a chance to hear from Georgia running back Kendall Milton yesterday, and it just kind of reminded me so much of, he was like a junior in high school. He did an interview with Jeff Sintel, and there were a bunch of good running backs of that class of 2020, and a lot of those guys I still really like. I think Tank Bigsby's a really good running back, and obviously Zach Evans, I think, still has a lot of promise, even though that maybe that first year wasn't quite what some folks originally thought it would be. But Milton was always the guy I just sort of was the most impressed with. And it was because of how he carries himself, how he speaks, just a really smooth talker and, pretty thoughtful guy all the way around. And he really put that on display yesterday. It's not difficult to understand why Kendall's a fan favorite and why there's just a lot of excitement about what he might be able to do for Georgia, here this season. Maybe some of that on Saturday for G-Day. We'll see about that. But it's easy to understand why so many folks like Kendall, when you hear him saying really all the right things in a press conference yesterday.
Well, and it's interesting you brought up Pella, because here's a guy that's walked through the front door and now has a window of opportunity.
There you go, Mike.
So her perfect setup with
the
Pella sponsorship, and we certainly appreciate them as much as Georgia appreciates Kendall Milton. And you're right, and I had a chance to exchange with Chris Milton, his dad, last night and talk about it a little bit. And Kendall is a guy that I think is on the verge of greatness. I haven't made any secret of it. I don't think you got to be a football expert to say that. Before I came on, I just mesmerized. I got a story up right now about Kendall talking last night, and I've got that video of that run that he had against Tennessee, and literally he breaks 7 tackles. I mean, he breaks 7 tackles. It takes 8 guys before Kendall Milton goes down. I mean, dare I say, Herschel Walker-esque. It was like, this is ridiculous, and he's just like he's a babe learning to crawl. He's not even there yet. I mean, the guy is going to get better, and he's explosive. The leg drive of all the great backs I've covered, and there's been a lot. This guy's got more leg drive than anybody I've seen, and I'm including Sean Alexander, Jamal Lewis, Alvin Kamara, Le'Veon Bell. I mean, these are guys I've covered up close and personal, and Kendall has better leg drive than any of them. The vision's coming, the timing's coming. I think he has those things, but he doesn't even. I mean, the guy hasn't scored a touchdown for Georgia yet, if you can believe that. So I do think he's going to be, based on Kirby went out of his way, and I listened closely to Kirby because Kirby's very foreshadowing. He really liked what he did in short yardage situations, and if we're being honest, that's been a problem for the last few years. Not just Amir White, but as you pointed out, Swift had a problem with it at the start of the year. A couple of years ago, I kind of brought that stat out, and DeAndre took it personal and started knocking some people over in short yards. You tell guys like DeAndre Swift they can't do something, and they're pretty eager to prove you wrong, right?
Yeah.
And he did, and he really turned it on. But I think Kendall is going to have a role next year. I think you're going to see him as a short yardage guy. I think you'll see him hit some home runs as well. It is a battery of backs. And if you look at the schedule, I think it's pretty clear that the most important thing is to have Kendall Milton available in November, December, because I think he's a guy that puts you over the top. I really do. I think he's special. And that's not to say that there's not a lot of good backs, because there are. I mean, my goodness, James Cook is one of the more explosive guys in the SEC. We've talked about Kenny McIntosh and his broken tackle rate. Certainly Zamir White is a veteran that's trusted and loved by the coaching staff. And Dejon Edwards has turned some heads, by the way. So you've got a battery of backs. But if you were asking me to invest in one guy and say who's going to be the most likely guy to be an NFL rushing champion, it would be Kendall Milton at this stage.
Well, there you go. Mike, certainly appreciate you being here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Harris Cherokee Casino Resort today. We will look forward to catching up with you as we head towards G-Day. Of course, plenty more from you on the website there, DawgNation.com there as well. Thanks for being here, and we'll look forward to chatting with you soon.
Appreciate it, BA.
Good stuff.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
All right, we'll roll on here to our SEC Through, and listen, I just think G-Day is going to be a lot of fun. Very interested to see how all of that goes down. I've told you this before, that, part of my, kind of bias related to some of this, and we can bring that music down just a little bit. Part of my bias related to, some of the stuff that happens on G-Day is I sort of view it as an offensive event. Sometimes I'm not quite so sure how you can really judge what a defense does because, let's face it, people do want to see the explosive offensive plays. My assumption is the defenses are kind of running what is, probably, fairly basic scheme, although I'm not sure I'd know the difference, one way or another. Anyway, you're obviously not sacking quarterbacks, things along those lines. But I thought that yesterday, Georgia linebacker Nakobe Dean did give us something to kind of look for from that defense on Saturday. We'll talk about that here coming up in just a couple minutes' time. Before that, I want to tell you about my friends at secondchance.law. And I think this is a really important thing. And one of the things I love doing on the show is I truly believe that the companies we have a chance to tell you about on this show are going to benefit. And in some cases, it's a specific segment of our audience, but I love telling the stories about companies that I think are going to really improve the lives of some of the people in our audience. And I think that secondchance.law is certainly an example of that because there are some new Georgia laws in place that allow, folks who, let's face it, people, have things happen in their life and, they wish they hadn't happened. You break a law, something along those lines, and it leads to a conviction, and you have kind of that dragging around with you forever. Well, not anymore. New laws kind of give you a chance to have certain offenses restricted off your criminal history, and that's what secondchance.law kind of helps with, because the process can be kind of confusing a little bit. A lot of things with the law are, but this is what secondchance.law does for you, though. They've kind of turned this into a simple online quiz. When you answer the questions on this quiz, you're able to kind of determine your eligibility for this. And by the way, secondchance.law can also help you get eligible if you're not currently eligible for a situation like this. You already know this. When you get some of this kind of stuff, kind of taken away, better employment opportunities. In some cases, it provides better housing opportunities. One of the partners here is a double dog, means two-time UGA graduate, former Redcoat, someone who's been listening to DawgNation Daily since way back when we started back in 2015. So it is my great pleasure to recommend them to you. And I truly believe that better lives for the people who kind of come in contact with this and use this service, obviously that's a no-brainer. So secondchance.law is the website, secondchance.law. And find out how they can help you today. All right, let's roll through our SEC through here for a moment. I want to go back to near the top of the program. Earlier, we kind of dealt with where Georgia comes in for the ESPN preseason FPI. And let's face it, for some of you that care about analytics and stuff like that, even though I like citing the FPI stuff from time to time, it's always been kind of a bootleg version of what, say, Football Outsiders has done or what Bill Connelly used to do prior to when he came on board for ESPN. This was just kind of their... It's almost like the way in which you're in high school and you copied somebody's homework, but they told you, hey, don't make it look too obvious. That's what ESPN FPI has always been. It's sort of a copycat version of the other analytics stuff with enough changes to not make it be quite so obvious. It's never been quite as sound as some of the other analytics metrics that are out there. This may be, though, just the dumbest thing they've ever put out there. So I'll show you this ESPN Stats and Info tweet of the top 10 preseason FPI for 2021. No surprise near the top. Alabama, obviously, number 1. Oklahoma at 2. Oklahoma was actually much better defensively a year ago, so them being higher and an analytics thing like this, not a huge surprise. Clemson's at 3. But then Iowa State at 4 is a little bit, of an eye-opener. I think Matt Campbell's a really good coach, and Iowa State was a good team a year ago. But at 4, I don't know that many betting people are going to, certainly bet them at that kind of rate against some of the other teams on this list. And then Ohio State, no surprise. Texas A&M, I've touted them, obviously. Georgia at 7, maybe that makes sense. But where do you get Mississippi State coming in at 8th? I mean, that's just I would be embarrassed to even publish this. And I know it's based on metrics and things like that, but metrics are only, it's like the old computer phrase about garbage in, garbage out. Your metrics are only as good as the human who's inputting the data. And if this is what your data spit out, then I would suggest that you need some new computers because obviously that's not what Mississippi State is. By the way, you got Oklahoma State at 9. So you got, according to ESPN's FPI, you got 3 Big 12 teams in the top 9 preseason. I think overall that's probably pretty silly. I'm not quite so sure that many people are buying that one way or another. By the way, Penn State coming in at 10. That's a road game for Auburn in the month of September there, so I guess keep that in mind just a little bit. So a little bit of silliness from the ESPN preseason FPI. I'm not sure I make much of it. It's almost like one of those things that, like, you know, the stuff that comes out, hey, here's the favorite fast food restaurant in all 50 states, and some of the stuff is just sort of an obvious attempt at trolling. I'm sort of wondering if that top 10 from ESPN is not also kind of just an obvious attempt at trolling there on that. Couple other things real quick. I think there's some interesting, and by the way, a lot of this stuff we'll talk about more today, this afternoon, 3 p.m., SEC Country Live. Looking forward to doing that with you on the SEC Country Facebook, the SEC Country Live YouTube page. We'll do that 3 p.m. today. A lot of these conversations will continue this afternoon, 3 p.m. for SEC Country Live. Really excited about that. Ed Orgeron's talking about his quarterback situation and LSU. So Max Johnson get the first snaps of spring, but since then, it's kind of been a little bit of a mixed bag there between, I guess, TJ Finley's still involved in this. Obviously, Miles Brennan's kind of back from injury. Garrett Nussmeier, the kind of hotshot incoming freshman. And as it stands right now, I don't think really anybody knows who's getting that job, but as Mike Griffith kind of alluded to, we are in the transfer portal age. I think there's a little bit of thought that for at least a couple of those guys, maybe not Nussmeier because he just arrived on the scene there, but for a couple of those guys that if they don't win the job, they may be looking to bolt. Maybe Johnson may be one of them, there for sure. So a little bit of an interesting quarterback situation for a team I think a lot of us have said we think could be better for the upcoming season, but unsettled at quarterback right now, and Ed Orgeron not really giving much in the way. Let's go ahead and try to mute that if we can so that doesn't keep beeping. But a lot in the way of very, very, not very revealing thus far for Ed Orgeron on that. By the way, similar situation over at Auburn where quarterback talk is taking place. And it's kind of interesting when you're Brian Harsin, an offensive-minded head coach, Mike Bowe, the offensive coordinator, and you're not tied to Bo Nix. It seems like the discussion around Nix by those coaches is a lot more open and honest than it would have been maybe under the Gus Malzahn age, because Malzahn obviously brought Nix in. And, they're challenging Nix right now to make better decisions there at Auburn. He started a bunch of games, and he's had some nice moments. Obviously, people remember the Oregon game, the first game that he played as an Auburn quarterback, but it hasn't always matched the very best when it comes to sort of the uneven performances there for Bo Nix. When I look at the situation, though, at Auburn, listen to some of the things that Harsin has recently said, as I said, kind of challenging his decision-making, I think the worst thing about Bo Nix are the expectations that Malzahn originally set for him. Gus Malzahn, stood in front of microphones, podiums, press conferences, things along those lines, and, said that he believed that Bo Nix was going to be a championship quarterback. I think that Gus did some actually pretty good things at Auburn, and I think maybe was kind of unfairly fired after this past year. But this was an example of something that was probably better left unsaid. Nix, because his legacy, because he was a good quarterback there in the state of Alabama as a high school guy, had a lot of expectations anyway. And I think that Gus Malzahn fanned the flames of those expectations even more. It becomes really hard to live up to. I mean, frankly, Nix is not a great quarterback, but he is an established starter, something that not every SEC team has. And I think part of the problem here is that Auburn fans get excessively frustrated with Nix because simply the output on the field has not matched the expectations that his previous coach certainly contributed to. So interesting to hear the way that Harsin and Bobo are talking about Nix right now, and kind of a little bit more, I guess, dispassionate way compared to the way that Gus Malzahn would have talked about him, someone who actually recruited him and brought him in there to the program. And then finally there's this. So there's a little bit of chatter right now about Kyle Pitts of the NFL draft. I've said before, as a Falcons fan, I don't love the idea of the Falcons taking the former Florida guy at number 4, but I'd probably make peace with it because I do think he's that dynamic of a playmaker. But now you get all this chatter about would teams actually trade up to get him? Probably not, the top 3. That seems like, all kind of quarterback destinations right there. The Falcons, though, at 4, a team that could consider not taking the quarterback. Is there a team looking to move to that spot, whether it be Miami? You've heard, I think, Dallas even rumored with all this kind of stuff. It's just really amazing how Kyle Pitts now probably stands as the most, interesting tight end prospect the NFL draft's ever produced. And I guess I'm kind of curious from the Florida standpoint, there's, this push, and I think this is what they originally sold to Rick Gilbert on. Hey, come here to Florida. You can be the next Kyle Pitts. But when you look at the way the NFL draft is setting up right now, you almost wonder if there's ever going to be another Kyle Pitts, just how unique he's being treated by these NFL draft scouts right now. I'm sure that Dan Mullen in Florida will probably try to sell this. Hey, we're the kind of program that produces Kyle Pitts, but I don't know that what Pitts kind of has going for him as a prospect right now can be duplicated. I've never seen a tight end being discussed the way that he is there right now. I think that's really interesting. We'll make that your SEC through. And you're on DawgNation Daily, presented by Harris Cherokee Casino Resort. I want to talk, as I said before, Nakobe Dean setting the standard for what Georgia's defense is going to do on Saturday. And, sometimes you're kind of left to wonder, well, what do you want to see from a defense? What can they do in a scrimmage like this? And, Dean pretty simply yesterday said, hey, let's just go out there and see, can we be a good tackling defense? It's something that Kirby Smart said that he wanted to see more of from his defense. Said it's hard to practice that because you risk guys getting hurt. But if you don't practice tackling, you can't be a good tackling team. And so if you want to judge the Georgia defense on Saturday, here's as simple as you might want to, say it. When there's contact with a ball carrier, receiver, running back, whatever, does that guy go to the ground or does he shake free and get extra yards? That, to me, is a pretty good way to measure the success of the Georgia defense on Saturday during G-Day. And yesterday when he spoke to reporters, Nakobe Dean went into a little bit more detail about that.
We pride ourselves on getting chest to chest and thudding anybody with the ball. So, and that's part of the defensive standard. And it's something that we kind of uphold. And it's like, basically, we don't take anything less is not good enough. So they need to get chest to chest and be able to chest to chest and throw them and be able to stay up. And that's basically the standard at practice.
So listen, I think that's a great way to think about the Georgia defense on Saturday. Do they go chest to chest? Do they knock those guys down? And even if they're not sacking quarterbacks, things like that, judging those tackling skills of those Georgia defensive players on Saturday becomes a way to evaluate that defense along what you're expecting from the offense there as well. So pretty good stuff there from Georgia linebacker Nakobe Dean. As we wrap up here today, let's do so the way we do our Gator Hater roll call, taking a look at some of the funny Gator haters in our audience. Golden Shoe Award winner going out today. This is a really good one to Brandon Mathis, who, and listen, I think my wife would probably agree that I do come across a little bit Clark Griswold from time to time. You see my face there is Clark Griswold being gifted the golden shoe. I love Eddie in the background here on top of the Griswold family cruiser. Of course, cousin Eddie himself, Dan Mullen, they're on display there for that there as well. Very funny from Brandon Mathis. Great stuff. Truly a well-deserved golden shoe winner for Brandon at Kobe1 Benobi on Twitter. By the way, we are now inside of 200 days for our Gator Hater Countdown. 199 days from now, we'll see you tomorrow, DawgNation Daily, presented by Harris Cherokee Casino Resort. And on video, time now for our R.S. Andrews Cool Down. Appreciate all of you being here for our comment section here right now. And, of course, don't forget to check out R.S. Andrews. Find them online, rsandrews.com, for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised, the price that's promised. It's one of the reasons why I know that I can recommend them with great, great pleasure, because folks want that AC staying inside the house on days like this and keeping your house all cool and comfortable, because it's hot. It's hot on the outside. I love spring being here, but it means air conditioning's working overdrive, so make sure yours is ready to go for the spring and summer that's on its way there. Let me do Facebook first today, because I believe I started on YouTube yesterday. So I'll do Facebook here first. We'll take a few comments, and we'll get rolling after that. Oren Chile says everyone's avoiding it, but I'll say it. Nakobe Dean's heading for a Roquan Smith type year here in 2021. Here's one thing I'll say, because listen, I don't want to contribute to ludicrous hype levels. I just think some of that kind of stuff just gets overdone. But here's where I'll join Oren on some of this. It is certainly a possibility, and I say that knowing full well how good Roquan was in 2017. It is certainly a possibility that Nakobe could be, as good as that top 10 level pick, something along those lines. That is a possibility. And, I'd put Roquan's single season up in 2017 right up there with any of the great single season performances in Georgia defensive history. I mean, it was that good. And, I think from an intangible standpoint, it was even better than the stats can measure. But, Nakobe's got a chance. I mean, I don't want to get too inside baseball here, but just speaking to reporters yesterday during a spring in which he's not practicing, that gives you an idea of how valuable Smart views his leadership to be. He's been a tackling machine the last couple of years anyway. I mean, imagine the way that it comes together, because when you make the Roquan comparison, the thing you got to understand is that, Roquan was not that guy in 2016, I should say 2015, 2016 necessarily. He was a freshman in 2015 who looked a lot like freshmen do. In 2016, he was a good player. I think he had 95 tackles. He was a good player. It wasn't until 2017, and it was really early in the season. You notice this, the Notre Dame game for me is when I really came to appreciate, just how good Roquan Smith was. It was that exponential, explosive growth that happened in that junior season. So it's certainly a possibility. It certainly is a possibility. Isaac Cruz says he's glad to know I started on the right side of things today. Isaac, I'm glad to know that you're happy about that. Epic Robinson and having some fun with our buddy Philip Jordan Wells there as well on Bo Nix. John Cooksey says, I was sitting on the hill outside watching practice while watching baseball yesterday. He says, I saw 15, 20 kids filing out of practice. We will win the, oh my gosh, look at those dudes award. We are big. Yeah, it is one of those things that if you see some of these guys and you haven't, seen them regularly, especially who just walking around campus, sometimes in the context of football, you sort of expect everybody to be big. But if you see a guy kind of spilling out of the indoor, heading, wherever they're going, you see a guy, as Gordon Sully would say, if you see him in street clothes, it's really just awe-inspiring how big some of these guys are, and well put together, of course, there as well. John, I think you're 100% right about that. Keith Fold says we would not have won the Rose Bowl without Roquan. Yeah, I think you're right about that, Keith. And, this comes across as a brag, and I don't mean for it to, but I was lucky enough to be on the field, kind of right there on the, the side of the field where the overtime was taking place in that Rose Bowl. And there's a certain aspect of Roquan's game on a short field like that where, everything is kind of condensed and kind of compact. And he was just – I've always said that Roquan at Georgia that particular season looked like he levitated. And this overtime, I'm standing right there, I'm, straight ahead view, field level view of him. And you just watch the way in which he just closes, 30 yards one side or the other, sideline to sideline. Just so, just sudden, not quick, sudden in terms of his movement. I think you're absolutely right to give him credit for that. Philip Jordan Wells says, I missed the first comment on the thread. Jermaine King says, do you remember the biggest thing we were debating about before the pandemic was will Sanford Stadium be selling alcohol? The good old days. Yeah, boy, that seems like kind of a long time ago, Jermaine. You're right. That the only thing we had to worry about was whether or not Sanford Stadium would be selling enough alcohol. That's exactly right. Boy, how things have changed since then. So, Philip, what comment did I mention? Put it back in there again. Epic says, I wish I'd seen the whole thing. Yeah, sometimes I miss some of these things I wish I could be able to see. Matt Rugavina says Rose Bowl was a complete win. Everybody contributed. Yeah, and I'll just say that after all this time, it still holds up, right? I could watch the whole thing right now, from opening kickoff to final Sony Michel score. I could watch the whole thing. And, even when Georgia eventually wins a national championship, I believe eventually it will, it may win more than one. But even when it does, I'm sorry, you're going to have to go a long way towards having anything be better than that Rose Bowl win over Oklahoma was. A legitimately good team. I thought the Oklahoma fans, created a fun atmosphere that day. It was just a great day for college football. Obviously, the backdrop of the San Gabriel Mountains and everything goes along with that. You couldn't, it's the best venue just because of the history and the prestige that the sport probably has to offer. And the game, just an all-time great Rose Bowl. To me, it's a little bit like I'm a big Braves fan. The Braves won the World Series in 1995, but there was nothing from the 95 season that matched the excitement of a couple years prior to that, the walk-off Game 7 win in the 92 NLCS with the Sid Bream slide. It was the best moment, even though the end-of-season result wasn't as good as it would be a couple of years later. I think it's going to be the same way when Georgia eventually wins the national championship. The odds of there being any moment in that season as good as what the Rose Bowl was in 2017 or January 1st of 2018, just not likely. Just not likely. Bill Sanders says, I still have the Rose Bowl on video. Still watch it, too. Yeah, I can imagine that. Epic Robinson also still talking about the fishing scandal at Auburn. Yeah, if there was ever a school that could have a fishing scandal, it would be Auburn. It would be Auburn for sure. Randy Hall says, prediction of sacks for Adam Anderson. Listen, as Azeez Ojulari wants to come on my show and say he's got him as a double-digit sack season, who am I to argue with Azeez on that? He clearly knows better than I do, so if that's what Azeez is saying, that's what I'm going with there as well. Good stuff. Jay Shops, by the way, shouting out Raphael Belliard. Always fun to go back to those old-school Braves. Mike D says the hot rod kick before the half, though, huge moment in that Rose Bowl. It really was. And, a couple years ago, we did DawgNation Appreciation. It's always going to be one of the things I was, it was a really proud moment for us. And we're going to do a DawgNation Appreciation again here, soon, too, hopefully. But for those of you who had a chance to be a part of it, maybe missed it, like one of the things that we did, and, I kind of worked with some of our video staff at the time to, kind of create this video of the Rose Bowl. And I really wanted to kind of highlight that Rodrigo Blankenship field goal because on the heels of Oklahoma thinking they'd knocked Georgia out of that game, Baker Mayfield gave you the throat slash gesture. And the way the Blankenship field goal changed it. And really, I think for a lot of people, and I know maybe it seems like revisionist history, but I really think this is true, that for a lot of people, it seemed at the moment like the game had been changed by the Blankenship field goal. Not an obvious, gesture that Georgia was going to win, but all of a sudden, the possibility of Georgia winning was kind of brought back into the conversation a little bit more. So, yeah, that's one of the things that makes it such a great game is there are these twists and turns along the way of, Oklahoma gets up big, but here's a hint that Georgia may be coming back, then slugfest in the second half, and kind of on and on you go. Frank Patterson says, speaking of the FPI stuff we talked about before, he says, of the 6 teams ahead of us, he says 3 or 4 of those are starting new quarterbacks. He says he's not worried. Yeah, I wouldn't be worried about anything one way or another based on the FPI stuff. David Gross says Mullen wears hairspray. I think that's actually probably true. G. Grace says he doesn't rewatch Alabama games. He says once the dynasty is over, I'll go back and indulge. I don't know why that's funny to me, but it just kind of is. HR Pickin' Stuff says the Georgia-Cincinnati game was fun to watch. Yeah, it's a pretty good game, I thought. I actually kind of enjoyed that. Enrique Murillo, kind of the same thing on that. Yeah, I enjoyed that Cincinnati game. DMart42 says, I've never seen anyone tackle as consistently as Roquan. Other people match his speed and athleticism, but his form was flawless. Yeah, kind of also reminds me of something else in that DawgNation Appreciation. For those of you that weren't with us back then, this was like a big on-stage event. We had Nick Chubb, Sony Michel, Roquan Smith, Davin Bellamy, Lorenzo Card, and they were all telling stories. And one of the stories they told, and I think this is really funny, is they said that Kirby Smart never yelled at Roquan. Like, Kirby obviously yells at everybody. If you've ever been near that practice field, you can even hear him. He's equal opportunity encourager from time to time. But they would all say that Roquan never got yelled at. Essentially, Roquan basically from the coach's eyes always did everything right, and it's easy to understand, why he would. Yeah, Jordan Bowman as a Clemson fan kind of referencing some of those same, kind of Clemson guys of, when you see them out of context and in kind of a normal situation, you just realize just how big these guys really are. Michael Boyd says, is G-Day going to be on the radio? I believe it probably will be. Let's do a couple more on YouTube. We'll go back to Facebook. Dapper Dan says, good to see Dapper Dan in the comment section, by the way. Which position matchups have you most excited with the upcoming Clemson games? Look, excited, becomes, advantage that you think Georgia may have with its pass rush against what was obviously kind of a suspect Clemson offensive line against Ohio State. So that's a thing. But then interested in terms of how Georgia establishes its offensive line to mitigate what's going to be a clear strength of the Clemson roster, which is its, kind of front seven defensive line pass rush situation. So you got both those things going on. And then as Kirby Smart, spoke about on Saturday, essentially not using the George Pickens injury as any kind of excuse. How explosive can those Georgia wide receivers be in that game? And as Kendall Milton and Warren Ericson talked about yesterday, how much can you pair big-time passing attack with, dominant running game? Those are issues that really matter to me as you head towards that game in September. It's going to be a lot of fun. Good to see Tennille Calvino in the comment section today saying Georgia is everything. Happy to have Tennille in here today. Randy Hall says, seems like Warren Ericson stepping up at center. I sort of get the impression on that. Philip Jordan Wells says, Bo Nix is not a crook. However, he is guilty of impersonating a real quarterback. There you go. Philip Jordan Wells with a little bit of a Nixon reference there. Pretty funny stuff. John Cooksey, he says, was in the stadium. He says, Rose Bowl, Sony Michel ran right to us, then bedlam, understatement. Yeah, so much fun. So much fun. One of the happiest, I mean, from a sporting sense, probably the happiest moment of my life. The kind of thing that I'll never forget. I'll never forget it. Let's see what else. Some of y'all. We had a vague Braves reference a moment ago of Rafael Belliard. How about taking it back even further with Bruce Benedict over here on the Facebook side? And Bruce Benedict eventually became, am I right about this? Is he the guy that became the SEC basketball referee? Is that Bruce Benedict, former Braves catcher? Matthew McGahee says, can you find a loss other than possibly Clemson? I can't. Yeah, on paper it doesn't look that way. Now, I jokingly said yesterday, the fact that you don't really see a potential trap game maybe scares you a little bit because the definition of a trap game is you kind of don't see it coming. So, maybe that's something to be fearful of. But as of right now, no, I don't really see much of that. Let's see what else. Steve Bond says, have you heard anything on Clay Webb? No, I really haven't. I don't know that Webb is necessarily on that too deep in terms of, the most competition for playing time right now. I don't really quite know what that means necessarily. I know he's, battling a little bit in the way of, injury stuff here and there. So I don't really know where things stand with Webb right now. But I have to say that in terms of being an immediate competitor for playing time, the silence would be a little bit deafening on that point at the moment. I'm not hearing much at all on that. Pete Williams says, I was glad to see Georgia win the Rose Bowl, but even happier to see Baker Mayfield get beat. Yeah, I wouldn't know what you mean about that. And Bill Sanders does say that, yes, I am correct. Bruce Benedict, former Braves catcher, did become a basketball ref later on. Kind of couple cool careers. Tennille Calvino and Philip Jordan Wells kind of going back and forth there a little bit. You love to see that. All right, last thing before we get ready to go here. Back on YouTube just for a second before we get ready to go. DMart42 on Ladd McConkey. I could see him potentially being a G-Day darling, in kind of even in keeping with some of the guys before who've earned a lot of praise coming off G-Day. I could certainly see that. Enrique Murillo says, if anybody steps up the most for Pickens, it's going to be Big Play Blake coming back eventually from injury. I'd love to see that. Yeah, Frank Patterson also talking about Ladd McConkey there too. Robert Barnes says he's excited about seeing the Georgia defense against DJ Uiagalelei in that Clemson opener. That's going to be a lot of fun. Foster Moss says, any Aggies updates? See, even when I don't mention Texas A&M, I still get grief. Y'all are. But as I've said before, I need y'all to give me grief. Otherwise, you get a bunch of lights shining in your face, big microphone in front of you. You might have a tendency to get a little bit of a big head. So thankfully, I have all of you to bring me back down to earth here to keep that from happening for me, and I appreciate that. Richard Dees, we'll make this our last comment today. He asked about Adonai Mitchell potentially becoming a go-to receiver. I'll tell you this. Mitchell was a guy that we didn't really talk about a lot on the, kind of the early stages of the 2021 class coming together. But I've definitely drank the Kool-Aid on him. Just on the basis of what Terrence Edwards has said, Kirby Smart has mentioned the fact that he's made some plays, and you realize that some of, what kind of has allowed Mitchell to fly under the radar is the fact that he's kind of a non-traditional arrival at Georgia, a guy that, did not, play football last year, was kind of working and training and kind of getting ready for the process. But, there are some very kind of oddball stories for some of the best receivers in college football right now. Recent years, you've had, walk-ons have success at Oklahoma. Ohio State's arguably best receiver is a former 3-star recruit. This is not one of those things where everybody that dominates is, former 5-star, top 5 receiver in the country. That's not necessarily the way that this all goes down. So I'm not saying that's what Adonai Mitchell's about to do at Georgia, but, while there are a lot of very good former 5-star receivers, not everybody who becomes great was one. So if people are saying good things about Mitchell, then, maybe he's, worth paying attention to there. So I'm very, very curious about him, and one of the guys I'm probably most interested in seeing on G-Day on Saturday. So great conversation all the way around. Thank you for being here as part of our R.S. Andrews Cool Down. Let me also invite you to check out my friends at the AJC, Atlanta News Now at AJC.com. And I was thinking about this last night. It's kind of a fun story to watch right now if you haven't been paying attention to. Maybe it's time to kind of get into that. The Hawks right now in competition to, really have the potential, if they can, win some games here before the season's done. You're talking about a team that has a chance at a top 4 seed in the Eastern Conference, the playoffs. So, so a lot of interest, and there's great Hawks coverage. They're doing a great job with that this season over at AJC.com. You can kind of see all of that. And, obviously not a good night for the Braves last night. I don't know what's wrong with Max Fried. You got to try to figure that out. But, hey, at least it's nice to see, with Acuna at the top and moving Freddie back to that 2 spot, getting more at-bats for those, red-hot hitters. That seemed to work pretty well there on that front. And, listen, vaccine stuff, things like that, it's important to stay up to date on all that kind of stuff too. So please check out your Atlanta News Now from our friends at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Find them online, ajc.com. Atlanta News Now from our friends, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, online at ajc.com. Thanks for being here as part of our R.S. Andrews Cool Down. Hope all of you have a great day. I'll see you back here tomorrow, 10 a.m. for DawgNation Daily, presented by Harris Cherokee Casino Resort. We'll look forward to talking to you then, everybody.